Hey there, I'm Luke Voitas. I'm the woodshop technician here at the Gogglworks Center for the Arts in Reading, Pennsylvania. And I'm recording a video today to show you how to carve a spoon using knives. And to kind of start that discussion, I want to explain kind of in depth how orienting the spoon blank inside of a piece of wood is going to dictate how you carve. It's going to affect the strength and improve the quality of the spoon that you're actually making. So this video is intended also to be used in conjunction with our creative carryout package. So basically, if you live nearby, you can come pick up a spoon blank as well as the knives. You take those home with these videos. You can create the spoon, and then you would bring those tools back. Of course, it's my intention to show you how to do a spoon without that creative carryout if you have wood at home, the tools at home. So don't worry if you're in a far off place like New Jersey or God forbid Delaware. You should still be able to use this video to help inform your creation of the spoon. So the first part, like I said, it's about how we orient that spoon inside of the piece of wood. So I have here just a few pieces. So from the tree, you would have kind of a round piece like so. And from this point, you would typically then split the piece like so. And of course, this wood is going to split with the grain. You know, the tree is growing this way. It splits very easily with a hatchet or with a froe right down the center. And this is the direction you're going to actually orient the spoon inside of the piece of wood. You want that spoon to be going with the grain, with the direction of the growth, to capture the strength of the actual wood. You can imagine if you were to place your spoon going across the tree, if you cut a very thin slice, a kind of cookie out of your piece of wood here, and then try to create the spoon across there, the fibers are running out a very short length here, and that's going to cause the spoon to break very easily. So by orienting the spoon lengthwise in the piece of wood, we capture the strength of the grain. The other thing we want to do when we are orienting the spoon is create kind of predictability in the type of cut that we're going to be making. So if we do this correctly, we're going to be able to make really consistent cuts all the way through, and they're going to be smooth and nice. So you can see in this spoon here we have what is called crank. So there's just a little bit of lift here. And of course, the thought there is that, if you're eating and you're getting kind of crazy in your conversation, you're really articulating, gesticulating, you don't want your soup to go flying when you return to look at your spoon. If you're holding your spoon, the soup should stay in the bowl, okay? But this is also creating that predictability. So what we've done here is we've dictated that cuts are going to come from the nose of the spoon down into this point and down the handle this way. Also, we've created kind of this fan shape, and that's going to create predictability. We're working from a wider point towards a narrower point. If we go in the opposite direction here, this is going to cause the fibers to pull apart. Kind of think about like if you're petting Kitty and you pet Kitty in the wrong direction, and all of Kitty's fur stands up. You're unhappy, Kitty's unhappy. Kind of the same thing happens in your spoon blank. If you go against the grain, the fibers pull apart, and you're not going to get clean cuts. Potentially even that will cause it to split unpredictably, and you'll damage your spoon. So from the round log, we've split the piece down. Generally from this point, we're going to split it once more. So we would generally split it down through here. Now we have a choice kind of whether or not we want to use the spoon do we want to do kind of like a quarter sawn spoon blank, or what I would describe as kind of a plain sawn blank? And what I'm describing there is, you know, in a piece of wood, if you cut it, this is a piece of firewood here, there we go, you can see that it's splitting and radiating out from the center there. So when you split the wood, you're going to be splitting along these cracks. So when you orient the spoon, you know, consider if this comes down through like so. Struggling with the light here a little bit, let's see. There it is, beautiful. So if we split it down the center there, we can then come through here. And so the grain you can see is kind of rolling through here. Okay, so this is going to provide strength, and it's also going to affect the way that it looks visually. The other way this could be done is to put the blank kind of running this way. Okay, so see the difference there? So blank is here, blank is over here. And that's going to affect the look of the spoon as well. And I wanted to show kind of two examples of this. Okay, so looking at a radial spoon versus kind of that plain sawn look, I have two examples here in oak. And you can see in this case, this is the radial spoon. Over here is where we have, you know, the sapwood. So that's kind of the outside of the tree. And this is the heartwood towards the center. So you can see how that, you know, here we have the radial. So that bit of spalting in the sapwood, the spoon is oriented like so. Okay. In the case of a plain sawn spoon, here we see the spalting in the sapwood around the rim of the spoon and also in the handle. In this case, it's oriented like so. Okay? So these are good examples because there is kind of a lot of drama here in the sapwood versus the heartwood, with just some spalting which is caused by fungus. But you can see how with the plain sawn, we also get kind of these circles here, and we can put that contrasting sapwood towards the rim and oftentimes in the handle as well. And you can see that kind of clearly also in, here's a mulberry spoon, actually that contrast is really nice there. So again, this is kind of the outside of the tree, and this of course would be kind of a smaller tree, which is why we get kind of so much of that there. So contrasting that, we have the radial spoon, and what's nice with radial is, you know, it tends to be very strong and predictable. You get the lines that are running straight through rather than kind of the circles. But also in a lot of woods, like in the case of this white oak here, you can see you're also getting kind of this flecking, which is going to give it a little bit of extra visual interest. You can see it in the bowl here as well. So, you know, that's a choice you're going to make to kind of capture different characteristics of different pieces of wood. White oak is something that's going to have a lot of that flecking, so oftentimes it makes sense to do that. But in the case of my other spoon here, because this is kind of unusual with this extreme spalting, to really maximize that, I did it in more of that kind of plain sawn look. I like that also in that mulberry and sometimes in cherry. So oftentimes I'll do plain sawn in kind of a smaller diameter branch, and I'll oftentimes do the radial in larger items. Okay. So I'm describing also how that orientation affects the direction that you're going to be cutting. Okay. So this ash is nice. It's not even really great for spoons. It's a little too porous and a little stringy, so it's not great for carving. But we can really see the grain nice and pronounced. And it's really nice and straight. And if you are selecting wood to make your spoon, generally you're going to be choosing something that's really nice and straight and really predictable. I really don't screw around with anything that has knots in it. Knots are going to cause the grain to kind of be swirly. It's going to make it unpredictable and hard to cut. You're going to have to constantly be changing direction with your knife. So I'll usually just ignore that stuff and try to grab something that's nice and straight like this. So then when the spoon is in this piece of wood, kind of what you're trying to do is have a change of direction in the grain occurring right around here, right in the top of the bowl. Okay, so you can see that the grain is kind of running out this way in the handle, and in the front of the bowl it's going in the opposite direction. Okay, so that's kind of the shape inside of the blank, and that's going to be kind of true with the way that the grain is running in either the radial or the plain sawn piece. Okay. All right, so from here I want to kind of pair that with the actual direction of the cuts. So I'm going to move the camera and we can take a look at my crude drawing over here. If you've watched my video on axing out a spoon blank, you know that once we've split the piece down, we've gone to halves and then quarters, we need to create flat planes to introduce that predictability into the spoon. Okay, so creating first those flat planes, we're going to have a shape similar to this, right? So it descends towards the bowl and then comes up out of that low point there. So we create a flat plane that looks like so. Okay? And this is represented in the drawing over here. Because what we're doing is we're allowing the grain to run out on the top side here. And in the bottom of the bowl, it's running this way. Okay? So what that means is that on the top side of your blank, you're going to be making your cuts down, because as you're cutting down, you're going to compress the fibers. So on the top side of the handle, you're working down this way. Okay? But you can imagine on the back side, because the grain is, running flat here, you're actually going to have to reverse direction and carve this way. Okay? And I'll explain that a little bit more when we actually start using the knives. Here in the bowl too, from kind of the nose, you're going to be working down this way while the handle goes this way. So the transition is really right in this point right here. Okay. On the bottom of the bowl, there's also going to be kind of a transitional point, and it's usually the widest point down here. You're going to be going this way, and you're going to be going up through the handle to the end here. So that's occurring potentially right in that area. So here, cuts are being made that way. Here the cuts begin going the opposite direction. And it's worth, explaining this. It might not make sense until you actually start doing it and having, problems and seeing that grain tearing out. But then you can kind of think through the problem and recognize why you're having the problem. Okay? So initially we're just creating that flat plane. Looks kind of like a spatula. From that point then we introduce the tapered handle here. And it's tapered so that the fibers run out through the top. It's kind of fan-shaped, widest at the top of the handle, and it gets narrowed towards the neck where the bowl begins. So here too, we're creating predictability. You can see in this other drawing, the red lines, again, representing the grain. The grain is going to run out into space here. So if we carved this way, it would pull it apart. It would even likely split it right off the corner here. So what we need to do is start at the end of the handle and work in this direction on both sides. And you can imagine too, if you're not using straight grained wood, or if you kind of switch it to the side or something like that, that's going to affect this predictability. And you'll need to change direction more frequently. So having, again, that straight material is really important. So you're going to work towards the neck of the spoon here until you get to this point where it rounds off. And you can see if I came up through here, once again, I'd pull those fibers apart and split it. So here we're going to go this way. So there's kind of a transitional area right here. See that? There's also a transition happening up here. At our widest point, again, this is oftentimes where we're switching direction. So from here, we're descending down. On the top side, we're going this way. So this is important. You're going to recognize this pretty quickly when you start carving. But if you're unfamiliar and you're not thinking about the grain, you're going to struggle a little bit at first until it kind of becomes intuitive, or until you can actually wrap your head around it. But it is going to take a bit of experimentation. When you do start using the knives, if you're digging in, if it's getting too grabby, flip the spoon around, make a cut in the opposite direction, and see how you do with that. So from this point, I do want to continue into how you're actually using the knives, different grips, and how you're going to prepare the spoon blank. We're going to use sloyd knives and hook knives, and starting with a blank like this, we'll get to a finished spoon.